How are we doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Shakedown. It is the 11th of the 5th. Welcome, one and all. How are we doing, co-host Shez and Baxty?
Good, Cam. How are you?
I was waiting for you boys to no-show me again. Just one of these. One of these. I'm all right, chaps. How you keeping, Baxty?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, I've had a busy week of rehearsal, and it's quite nice to take a break and just talk F1 with
Good.
like-minded people.
Good man. And the key word being like-minded. Although on this episode, I'm sure that there will be some disagreement. Can we talk? Let's talk about, I was going to say, let's talk about Baku. I had this massive joke planned to talk about the last Grand Prix as if it were Baku, because I just ignored Miami as a Grand Prix. So boring was it? How do you react to Baku, Shez? Baku, look at that. He did it anyway. How do you react? How do you react to the Miami Grand Prix in a couple words or less, please, sir?
Stale but interesting moments.
All right.
Definitely some interesting storylines there.
All right. Some of which we'll get onto, I'm sure, in short order. Baxty?
I'm going to have to give a slightly long-winded answer because I did watch the race, but I also had the Coronation concert on at the same time, so it's kind of like eyes were doing that. I think it when I watched it, I thought this is a complete snooze fest. But actually, the more I look on it, I think actually there was more to this race than meets the eye. Like, was it the best race of the season? It's probably up there, but that's because we've just had a lot of stinkers.
Mate, this is and therein lies your issue, right? That stinkers, that's becoming more of a habit than an exception. But you know what? Let's get into it. So I still don't understand how Max Verstappen pulled that off, chaps, and I want to talk to it. I want to try and unwrap and do a bit of a whodunit. I want you to attribute between Checo Perez's underperformance, masterclass from the hard tyres that everybody expected would be dog doo-doo again, and Max Verstappen just being a bit of a legend. And here's why. We're going to attribute what we can only say one. We're going to attribute that outcome that Max Verstappen came from 9th on the grid, no safety car, to beat Checo Perez by circa 5 seconds. I want you guys to attribute that to one of the aforementioned. Shez, let me come to you first on this, bruv. And don't sit on the fence, por favor. I need one answer. This is important stuff.
All right. So I'm going to attribute it mostly to Max, but that's going to be on a split of 65-35.
I'm sure I said no fence hitting, but
It
anyway,
wasn't fence sitting. That's not 50-50.
So 65-45, you said?
35, 100%, right? So 65% of it is Max being top tier.
Ridiculously good.
And 35% of it is Checo underachieving, because they were definitely...
And you're not giving anything to the hard tyres outperforming what Pirelli had suggested they might at the start of the race?
No, we talked about this a little bit offline, right? That there are some caveats to this. That Checo was on the less preferred tyre, despite what Pirelli said. The race played out differently. He was on the medium tyre that wasn't the best race tyre at the beginning of the race. He was on full tanks, and I think, and he was on a green track that had been rained on the night before. So he was having to use worse tyres in a worse situation. So that kind of counts for him, but that stint was still not a great stint. And even when he got onto the hard tyres, when he should have been sort of keeping to sort of a few seconds away from Max, he dropped to sort of a pit stop away from him by the time that Max stopped. So that's why I think there's a little bit of situation in terms of he didn't have the optimum tire and conditions at the beginning of the race, whereas Max was in a better position in terms of the tire he had for the conditions. But there was also a big underperformance from him in the stints where he could have made a big difference when he did have the equipment underneath him. But the reason I've said what I've said is because I think that takes away from what Max did, in that he needed to, in his first stint, starting 9th and actually keeping that position off the line, he needed to be aggressive and yet preserve his tyres. And he did both of those. He got past everyone by lap 15. And he still had enough in hand that by the end of his hard tyre stint, he was doing faster times than Checo was on a brand spanking new set of mediums. So
I don't understand what's going on here, Shez. It's that.
Yeah, so that's incredible.
Baxty, chime in on this. And the only reason why I asked this question and frame it in this way is because I've heard a lot of the community saying things such as, he has the best car, that car is a rocket ship, any good driver would do what he's done in that car at the Miami Grand Prix. Chime in, Baxty.
I've got a bit of a problem at the moment, boys, because I've got splinters right on my backside because I'm sat on the fence.
Let's go.
No, listening to what Shez said there, I think I'm gonna. I think I can't really go more than 50-50 because I think Max was brilliant in that race, and I think he produced one of the overtakes of the season with the double overtake on Magnussen and Leclerc, which that slingshot. I mean, it takes a lot for me to react to an overtake. And, I'm sat there and I all of a sudden I just go, oh, and my wife's looking at me going like, what on earth are you doing? Because it was such a good move by Max. But at the same time, Checo Perez has shown this season that he can maintain gaps and he can hunt gaps down as well. Like maybe not on Max, but certainly he can do it. He's been more competitive this season. So I thought, Checo starting on pole, I think the best Max can hope for is a P2, like in Saudi Arabia, and that would still be a decent result for him in the championship. But Checo's stint on the mediums was poor, but I actually think his stint on the hard tyre was poor as well because they kept saying 17 seconds for a pit stop. And, Checo was closing the gap. He got to about 13.8, I think, at one point. It was about that 13, 14 second mark behind, and that would have been enough for him to get to be ahead of Max by some distance, and yet he then started dropping back. Now maybe he hit traffic, but I couldn't see his car, so I didn't know what was going on. But he dropped back to about 18 seconds. Max had a slightly slower stop, which is why Checo came out in front because Max's stop was 3.3, so that compromised Max tiny bit, but not massive. So I think if I have to make a judgment on it, even though I agree with what Shez is saying that the rain the night before did completely scrub the track surface and completely change what should have happened with the tyres. But I just think Checo still with that RB19 should have made more of it than he did. Fair play to him for defending the way he did into turn one. Because, if it was Valtteri Bottas, he would have just, you go on, son. Off you go. Yep. Yeah. But no, I do attribute it probably 55-45. Checo lost it rather than Max won it.
Oh. Let's go. So here's me now, lads. And again, I'm still, even days after the event, I'm still wrestling, trying to unpick. You know me, guys. I want to know why. I want to know the whys and the hows. And I still don't understand. I know Max is good. I know Max is really good. But he keeps shocking me and moving the bar forward almost periodically, almost at every race. At this point in time, he just keeps on doing these things that I just don't think he should be able to do, right? Even notwithstanding all of the things that you just said, right? Checo's underperformance, the setup probably was a bit dodgy, started on the wrong tyres, even though people said that potentially was the optimal strategy at the outset. Like, I just don't think how, chaps, because this is the brass tacks of the situation. I don't understand how Max starts from 10th, 9th in a zero safety car race and ends the race circa 5 seconds ahead of Checo. I just don't understand it, lads. That makes no sense. If Checo starts in, because reverse the situation, right? There's no way in hell on whatever tyres you want to give him. Don't care. There's no way in hell you reverse that circumstance and Max launches it off the line into free air, that Checo comes from 9th to beat, not just to beat him, but to beat Max Verstappen handily. Am I getting a bit gassed up, Shez, about Max here?
No, I mean that's why I've put the emphasis more on Max. So there's a couple of things, right? So you have to kind of qualify what underperformance means, right? That that car is capable of a certain performance that Max is able to extract from the car, right? Like he's able to get the absolute top level out of it, but you wouldn't know that was a top level if you had another driver like Sergio in the car, right? And I think that the telling point for me, and we were talking about this before, is the fact that in the first stint, Checo wasn't really able to drop Fernando. Now, if he'd been gapping Fernando like 10, 12, 15 seconds, I'd have said, okay, you know what? This is Checo's race. And if Max wins, then, you know, it's just Max. But because he wasn't able to, and Fernando was able to keep up in what is ostensibly a slower car, that puts it a bit more as Checo didn't get the most out of that car. And it may be the most that most people can get out of that car, but Max clearly has more affinity to it and can squeeze more out of it. That is Max. But there's also that skill of being able to preserve your tires in this current tire era is something that seems to mark out the top level drivers, and it's something that.
But Shez, that's meant to be Checo, right? That's meant to be his strength levels.
But can we knock that one on the head right now? Because Checo's had this reputation for being the tire whisperer, for being able to look after his tires, but that reputation came from a fact that he was always in a car that wasn't really sort of on merit a top 4, top 5 finisher, and he would always underperform a little bit in qualifying, because qualifying I don't think has ever really been his strength, and then he'd pull off a mega stint in the race to get the car to where it should have been in the first place anyway. His first couple of races back in 2012, when he was at Sauber, he got big kudos for how he pulled off a long stint in Melbourne that year. But actually, when you look back at it, should he have qualified the car a bit higher in the first place so he didn't have to do that mega stint? Max isn't doing that. Max is doing what you're telling me, which is he's doing things that he shouldn't be able to do in that car.
I don't get it,
Shez. And Checo can't match that despite his reputation. And that actually should tell us that whatever we think of Max's level, we need to sort of redress that a little bit, and actually it's higher than what we think it is, because that was a pretty epic drive.
I don't understand. Still, I can't compute it. Baxty, it's
Baxty.
It's nuts. Baxty's not having it. Push back, Baxty.
No, it's a little bit of pushback. I think the one thing we've got to really highlight here is the fact that Max, I think, lucked out with the strategy. Because I think everyone was saying you do medium to hard, that's how it's going to work. But the guys that started on the hard tyres, the guys like Max, the guys like Lewis, they had more pace at the end of the race. Now, yes, you could say, well, that's fresh rubber, but the way the track was playing, we saw it in qualifying. The track was getting quicker and quicker and quicker as it went on. And that's what happened, that actually you were better off starting on the hards and then going to the mediums. The teams wouldn't have known that because the data that they'd had 2 days of clear running, and then the rain washed it away. But they weren't to know that starting on the medium tire was a nightmare on a green track. And I think and that's why I've gone 55% in favour of Checo dropping the ball rather than giving Max the full credit, because I think if Max had started on the medium tyres, he would have probably got more of a gap out of the car. But would he have overcome the problems that Checo had with the medium tyres and the other medium tyre runners had as well?
So can I answer that? Because I think, number one, I think Christian Horner sort of weighed in on that, because that argument's come back to him, and he sort of categorically said that he thinks that Max would have won the race even if he'd been on Checo's strategy.
That's the exam answer though that he's always going to give, even if it's not true.
Yeah, he's got to say that, hasn't he?
But empirically, the other comparison to make is the two Mercedes drivers. So George started on the mediums on Checo's strategy, and Lewis started further back on essentially Max's strategy, and you saw how that played out. Lewis was quicker towards the end of the race, and yes, I take the argument that he was stuck in a DRS train sort of early on in the race. But he was much quicker and he did make up places. He was able to overtake, but George still had time and pace in hand to be able to make his, what was ultimately proved to be the counter strategy, work better for him and finish fourth. So it was still possible to get a better result out of it than what Checo was able to get out of the car. So all things being equal, with what Max had to put up with early on in the race and having to preserve his tyres despite having to attack at the same time, Checo should have still had enough in hand. And if he gapped Fernando more at the beginning when they were both on the same tyres, I think if Max had won despite Checo doing that, I think I would have given it a sort of 90-10 Max.
We'd be having a very different conversation if that was the case. Yeah. No, like I don't want to. Yeah, people are going to say, "Oh, classic Baxty's, knocking Max, blah blah blah." Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Max's drive was unbelievable. And I think he actually overcame, I think, the biggest thing for them, which was the shortening of the DRS zones. Because in the first couple of races this season, Max has just been gone, you know what? I'm just going to sit on your rear wing, and then once I get DRS, goodbye. But they've shortened it, and it actually makes you have to get the overtake. But Max had enough racing now to see, I can see Magnussen and LeClerc having a dogfight. I'm going to wait until turn one. I'm going to use my triple DRS, but I'm going to use it to get the toe and then slingshot off the back of them. Yeah, that's racing IQ. You can't learn that. It's instinctive. And I think that was an amazing overtake by Max, and I think you will not find many overtakes better than that this season. I think the only one I can think of is Alonso on Lewis at Bahrain.
That was very crafty. Also, I'm chaps. I'm not going to lie to you, man. Go on, sorry, Shez.
I was going to say, it sounds more and more Baxty like you're making the argument that Max had a lot more to do with it.
Yes, it's true.
No. Like, I was just trying to justify that I'm not like crapping on Max all the time. I am giving him credit because he deserves it. This was a statement win in the championship. Media pundits have been going, "Oh, Checo Perez has won 2 races out of the 4. We might have a title fight this year."
Behave yourselves.
And then Max has gone, "I'm not having any of that. Sit down. I'm the number one. I'm going to walk away with it this year. Goodbye."
Hold my beer.
Yeah, like Lewis used to do with Valtteri, occasionally with Rosberg. Just be like.
But this is the kind of thing that Hamilton would do to Bottas, right? That in races where you thought that he wasn't going to win because he didn't have the tyres, they're the ones where he'd be eking out the advantage while the other person didn't even know that that's what was happening.
The one I think of in that situation is when Lewis defended Spain 2014. I can't believe I'm mentioning a Spanish Grand Prix, but in the last stint, Rosberg had fresher, softer tyres. And Lewis just went, "Nope, you're not coming past. I'm going to win this race."
Yeah.
And that was a massive marker thrown down in that championship to be like, you can have all the advantages and I'm still going to beat you. And that's what Max did to Checo on Sunday.
But that's why I've got to give him his flowers, right? Checo could have done better, but Max really did the business.
He's
he
Lewis
took a
Hamilton.
disadvantage.
He's Lewis Hamilton shaped flowers. Apparently, we're drawing a lot of lines and connecting a lot of dots between Sir Lewis and Mr. Verstappen. Watch that the Emirati don't come for you guys. That's some will say that's blaspheming. It's techie. I'm astounded though, lads. Every single week, again to reiterate, this dude. It feels like I just don't understand. You watch the start of the race and I check the bookmakers' odds, and I just think he's got no chance. Like, second is in the bag. To his point, exactly what he said. Minimum is second to manage my own expectations, Max said. And I'm with that. There was no way that he wasn't going to get second, although going to give him some more Sir Lewis Hamilton shaped flowers, because getting through the pack without damage is a patience game, and he did it. He made it. He keeps doing these. He makes these very, very difficult things. Bro, he makes these very, very difficult things and these minefields look very easy at the moment. And I just think we're, I don't know, I always get a bit excited, Shez and Baxty, when we see, for me, the exciting time isn't seeing Lewis go and nail 5 championships pretty much back to back. The exciting time is the coming to of greatness, like on the way, when the parabola's doing one of these, on the way up to those peaks. And I think Max is in that now. I think we're seeing him develop race by race and add bits and facets to his game that he didn't have before, and that people need to give him credit for that. And just because he's in a dominant car, that doesn't mean, as you've said, Baxty and Shez, that he's not worthy of that credit.
That's what a season like this does, though. And I think I've said it before, that I think this is the kind of season where you're going to see, like, you know, these little things, these conversations that we're having, where we're saying, you know, is it Max, was it Checo? Much of it is probably moot, because you're going to see the payoff of that when he's in a proper title fight, when he's starting to use this as second nature.
That's the worry, Shez. He's
why is it a worry though? I think it would just be an absolute battle
as a Lewis Hamilton. That's what I'm saying though. But he's not even yet in his final form.
That's what Lewis did for 3 years against Nico. So when Seb Vettel came knocking on the door,
it was just,
Lewis was just like, "Nah, see you later."
No chance. I'm hardened. I'm calloused now and ready to go. Go on, sorry, Baxty.
Yeah, I was just going. I'm going to drop a little nuke and then I'm going to leave it, and then that's it. Before the season started, I had Max just outside my all-time top 10 list, but after these first 5 races, I'm going to put him in, and I'm putting him in at the expense of Sebastian Vettel.
Oh, mate, that's not a nuke.
That's not a nuke.
Trust me, maybe not for you guys, but there's enough people in this world that idolise him and call him the greatest ever. So I'm just like, sit down. He's not in my top 10 list.
Some people will see that as blaspheming, but only on account. Greatness is
right?
Great. Yeah, that's the point. Shez, greatness.
Based on stats.
Greatness is a 60-minute conversation in and of itself, right? Because a lot of people will see, and I had this chat with JF Wolfpack Performance the other day, a lot of people will see greatness as how good you were times how long you were good for, right? And I've never really been that way. I've always been a bit noddy as far. If I see you do a great thing a couple of times, and like, I automatically give that the stamp. But as soon as I see Max Verstappen, Brazil 2016, I'm like, oh well, okay, so I'm on notice then. I'm on notice. That train will not be late for this dude. It's coming to him at some point, right? So I don't know. It depends how you see great. If you prioritize longevity and the 4 titles that Sebastian, go on, Shez, talk to me.
Only because you're using Max's 2016 example, right? And I have to say that I only came to the conclusion, my sort of ultimate conclusion about Seb, sort of from his 2014 season onwards, that I thought that, you know, actually maybe I didn't. You know, even in his 4 years, you kind of.
And what is your conclusion? That he was more the car.
That the car flattened him. Yeah, but I didn't think that in 2008. In 2008, when he won in Monza, I thought, actually, this is the guy.
But you couldn't know then, right? This is the thing this is the conversation that we're having in many different forms. Chaps trying to parse out blame and culpability, right? Like the drivers, you will just never, and no pun intended, but you will never know whether to apportion, I don't know, 30% to Checo, 70% to Matt. You'll never fully know. Even if you look at the data, if you spend between now and eternity looking at the data, you'll never be able to apportion out with 100% certainty, well, Max was able to win that race because it was, I don't know, 50% him, 25% Checo, 25% the outperformance of the hard time. Similar with Seb, you will never quite know how much of those, I've got a hunch that 75% at least was the car, but you will never be able to attribute with any sort of certainty. Seb's 4 titles were, I don't know, X the car and X him. Like, you just can't do it, right?
But you have an entire career to look at, though, when it comes to Seb, right? Which you don't have with Max. So we haven't seen Max in a car after he's attained his peak that isn't as good as the Red Bull is right now. And if he's in a situation that Seb was in 2017 onwards or 2015 onwards, and he underperforms, then my view of Max come the end of his career is going to be very different to what it is right now.
And I suppose to that point, Shez, that's why a lot of the detractors who say that Max isn't great yet and you're being premature to anoint him such, how do you know, right? He may turn into Sebastian Vettel in a couple of years' time. Then I'm talking about him being very firmly on the path to greatness, I'm going to look like an absolute noddy chap, aren't I? You just can't. Maybe I am being a bit premature by saying that
you can't tell. This is the thing, isn't it? You can't tell without the fullness of time.
So,
it's
hence what I'm saying, Shez. What I'm not saying that if he keeps doing what he's doing this consistently, these type of things are just like near in the, to me anyway, as long as I've been watching F1, I'm just looking at this dude and I'm like, how are you doing this? All of the Achilles heels are just fading to black now. The bloody mistakes, the crashes. I'm not seeing any of it, chaps. And I'm just like, how do you beat this fella? Final question on this, because we need to move on to other topics and we've gone deep on Max. Shez, how do you beat Max Verstappen in 2023? Where's his Achilles heel if he has one, bruv? Because I'm not seeing it right now.
The biggest thing for me at the moment is that Max is not being challenged. When Max is being properly challenged in a car that is potentially able to beat him, that's when you're going to start to see whether he has big weaknesses or not. You know, the same weaknesses that he's had in 2021 and in the early part of 2022. Right now, you know, Baku was a really good example that the way Max fought against George Russell in the sprint race is not how he would fight against George Russell if a title was on the line against George Russell.
Go on. You know, what would be different, do you think?
I think George would have been in the wall.
Wow.
Oh, you're going the other way. I thought you were right.
I thought you were going the other way as immaturity. You think you would have put George in the wall if it was for...
Well, if that had been 2021 and it had been George versus Max, George would have been in the wall.
But how would you have put him in the wall from the outside?
He would have squeezed him much harder. When he had wheels in front, he would have squeezed him much harder. He gave him just enough space. And it's not something that in the heat of the moment, when he's got a title on the line, I've seen him do, or you know, when he's chasing his first win or a result. Whereas now he did it in Australia as well, where he was sort of okay with being overtaken by two Mercs off the line and into the first sequence of corners, because he knew that he's got a car that's going to come back at them.
Yeah, it's a bit. It's not a fair test, is it? When you've got triple DRS and you're gaining 6% on the rest.
That's what I think. So you're going to see what weaknesses are there when he's in a proper title fight, and I really, really hope we see one next season,
mate.
Because all we're seeing is that upward trajectory right now. We don't know how that actually affects him in battle, because he's not in battle at the moment.
Yeah,
this is a fabricated fight we're looking at the moment.
Oh, how dare you, Shez. Baxty, talk to me, sir.
I think Shez has hit the nail on the head, and I'm going to go a lot cruder with it. Piss him off. That's the way to do it. Look at the way he drives Lewis even now.
Yeah.
It's like he sees Lewis and he's like, must crash. You know, and that was what was born in 2021. It's just, you know, he will see it as, well, Lewis punted me off the road in Silverstone, so he's fair game now, which is complete nonsense. But you know, I feel like if you can get to Max, I think if you start pressurizing him in the car, I mean, that whole George Russell incident actually typified what Max would be like under pressure. He'd be like, you know, dickhead, you know. But and he's already looking at George Russell. They're looking at each other already for future title battles. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, me too.
And you know, Lewis is kind of sat there lurking as well. But I think you just got to get under his skin. We saw Lewis do it in 2021 when he would pull off these wins, like in Spain, you know, when he did the Hungary strategy on him, you know, and he had other races as well. You can get under his skin, and I think he is fallible. But he's a tough nut to crack. This isn't somebody that's going to crack easily. It's got to be repeated. And I want to see Checo do it, but I just don't think he's got the stones.
Checo,
there's a reputation thing there with Max, I think, as well, though. Like, I think he, especially against Lewis. Lewis was the king of the hill, and he knew, and he still sort of knows now that if he wants to be considered an absolute great, that's the guy he's got to get. But George is becoming that guy now as well, where there's enough incidents where he's going, you know, I can't just leave the door open for this guy.
Yeah, my fight's with you, not with the guy in the red car. Yeah. Everyone says the guy in the red car, but I'm looking at you, and I think, like Lewis was doing with Max when Lewis was dominant and Max wasn't so there. Lewis was like, "I'm probably going to cross at some point. Yeah. We're going to cross paths at some point,
mate." So King George Russell of King's Lynn, Norfolk. Put some respect on his name, chaps. That battle is going to be. He didn't even here for it. Although I will say, just finally on Max, he's talked about this, hasn't he? He's talked about watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix, and having
So
this.
good.
Oh, it's a brilliant documentary. But there's something that he's spoken to having or seeing in himself that Jordan also has. So he's talked about that spite, hasn't he? You know, Jordan would say, all right, then, so you're not going to pick me for college. All right, I will show you. And I think Max has that similar thing, potentially to his detriment. We don't know yet. Because again, like you say, Shez, it's untested. This 2023 Max Verstappen is untested. And potentially he does revert to type. You don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. But I think, again, my concern with my Lewis Hamilton fan cap firmly on is that Max can leverage this bitterness, this spite that he has, and make him use that to make him better. That's my concern. If he can do that, oh my goodness, the rest have no prayer. The rest have no prayer, lads, because I just feel like he's just he's hulking. he's like Dark Phoenix. I just don't. Lads, I'm concerned. I feel like George might be after Lewis is gone. I feel like George might be the only one on that grid, not named Sir Lewis Hamilton, to be able to take that to Max Verstappen. I just don't think the rest have the cojones, being honest, chaps. Checo Perez, you're having a laugh. Charles Leclerc won't be able to stand up to that. We'll get onto Charles very, very soon. But in fact, let's get onto him now. Charles Leclerc, very sexy segue. Don't bury the lead, Cameron. Charles Leclerc won't have the minerals to stand up to the fire that Max Verstappen can bring for 23 races. There you go. I've said it. To that, you react how? Sirs, I've said it.
I think you might be right, mate.
There you go.
I think that qualifying lap showed everything that I think that's currently wrong with Charles Leclerc. Like, I want to give a shout out to my colleague Tiziano, who is a big Ferrari fan, and we were chatting about this for the last couple of days. You know, Baku showed the best of Leclerc what he can do. You know, he's in a great car. It's not the best car, but he's in a great car. The Ferrari's a much better car than we give it credit for. It's just we've got such a dominant car. Everything else looks crap in comparison. But he put that car on pole twice handily. So that's what he can do. But he's pushing so hard that he's making so many mistakes. You know, that mistake that he made in Miami was his. You know, he hit the curb too hard. He lost his downforce, into the wall he goes. And it's because he's trying to overperform the car. We've seen drivers do it in the past. You know, they're trying so hard and they're making mistakes. You know, he's a bit like Lewis in that he likes the car on rails. You know, I remember Nürburgring 2011 with Lewis. He was on rails for that qualifying lap. He had to be faultless. One mistake and he's off and he's in the wall. And Charles, 7 or 8 times out of 10 will get it right. But it's these 9 or 10s, which is what Lewis can do. And Charles at the moment hasn't got the capability of doing it because he will make the mistake. It compromised his qualifying, but it also compromised everyone else. And, you know, and also the great driver will fight back. Charles didn't fight back. Yeah. He had an awful race. He was down out the points at one point and he couldn't get past Magnussen in a Haas. What are you doing?
Defeated mentally. Is it a mental thing, do you think, Baxty? I'll pose this back at you before I come to Shez. Do you think we're talking about Achilles' heels, right? Because it's clearly not his ability. He can drive. Nobody's going to tell me that Charles Leclerc can't pedal because he can. He's a ridiculous God-tier level pilot. Some will say that in equal machinery over one lap, the quickest of the field, right? Like he's rapid, but is his thing. I've long said that he lacks the strategy that a Carlos Sainz would have, the ability to read and react to a race and its misgivings in real time. I think we could all agree to that. But as far as his mistakes, can we attribute that to mental ineptitude? Is that a mental misgiving?
I'm going to come a slightly roundabout way at this. I actually think, and I'm going to go back to 2019 for this, I think 2019 did Charles Leclerc more harm than good. Yeah, we all look back on 2019 with rose-tinted glasses that he was the young guy, second year in F1, outperforming Sebastian Vettel, who I've said before was on the downwards trend by that point. The The Ferrari was quick because they had an illegal engine in the back. And he beat him. And he beat him fair and square. And he was really good. He got his first 2 wins. But he'd only had 1 year in F1 by this point. And I think Ferrari felt they had a Lewis Hamilton on their hands. And actually, I think he needed a bit more time to cook. Like George Russell did 3 years at Williams away from all of the pressure. And he went into that Mercedes ready. I think they put Charles in that Ferrari too soon. And he's still learning. And I think he needed a couple of years to really not be in because he had 2 years where he wasn't at the front, but he was in a Ferrari, so all eyes are on him anyway. He could have done an extra year at Alpha, really perfected things, and then, okay, he would have been in a crap Ferrari in 2020, but he would have hit the ground running. And I think that lack of preparation is starting to show now that he is making these mistakes, and it is costing him big style. Because we want Charles Leclerc to be at the front. We all can see that he's got the ability. I mean, he put that 2021 Ferrari on pole twice.
Chaos.
That's how good he is. But he's just not quite showing it yet. I think he's got the ability to get to a level of a Max Verstappen and a Lewis Hamilton and a George Russell. But I'm more and more subscribing to this theory that he might need to do it away from Ferrari and jump in a car from Brackley.
Talking about nuclear ones. Talking about nuclear ones. Shez, talk to me. How do you cure what's wrong with wrong? That's a really, really bad way to frame this. What are the drivers, no pun intended, of Charles Leclerc's very more frequent errors? And again, I suppose that's more concerning, right? Because he's meant to be maturing at this stage of his career. He's getting into his prime, but we're still seeing these errors drip feed through. So you're Fred Vasseur, Shez. Tell me, identify what's causing the issue and tell me how to remedy it.
So I think this is much more of a Maranello problem than it is a Charles Leclerc problem, in that, like you said, I think Leclerc is probably over 1 lap the quickest driver on the grid, and 9 times out of 10 you'd expect him to get probably even a bit more than what you think the maximum of that car is. I know that's not actually possible. You can't get more than physics will allow your car to do, but he will get something out of the car that no other driver will be able to get. But the problem with that what makes him so special is what also makes him have these little errors. And I kind of love him for that. And that's been compounded by the fact that he thought he was going to be in a title fight this season, but the car's not allowing him. As good as it is over 1 lap, it still has problems preserving its tyres over a race stint. So his 1 lap pace is out of this world sometimes. To be able to even get him close, 2-3 tenths away from a car that is, even in the second driver's hands, at least 5-6 tenths quicker than his. So to berate him for making the odd error in a season where he's not going to win the title, I think is a bit unfair. And actually, when you look back at the top end of last season, when he actually had a car that was genuinely in the title hunt before some of the technical directors and things sort of hampered them. And Ferrari are always more vulnerable to these things than other teams are, but I think because of the mentality that they carry. He was a paragon of consistency. He put the car on pole when it needed to be on pole. And I still maintain that in Bahrain last season, he outdrove and outthought Max Verstappen into in his little DRS chicken game. And Max needed to be told in Jeddah what he needed to do, whereas Charles was doing it off his own back. So Charles has got the mentality. He's got the kahunas, as you say it, the minerals, if you want, to do what he needs to in a championship contending car. I think the mental thing that I think he's got at the moment is that he feels like he should be in a championship contending car and he isn't, and that's the reason he's pushing harder, and that's the reason why sometimes you'll get a qualifying performance where he's a tenth or two off the front, and you'll get a performance like you did in Baku. And other times you'll get him in the wall. But when you get him in a consistently championship contending car, I think you'll see a different side of him. And I think you'll see more of Bahrain Jeddah Charles 2022 rather than sort of Le Castellet, Paul Ricard, Charles Leclerc, when actually you could see that the performance of the car was starting to fall away, and there were more issues happening back at the factory and at Maranello that were plaguing on his mind and starting to. You could tell that he knew that it wasn't just Max driving away from him; it was stuff at home that was costing him a title. When that's taken away, I think you'll see a different Charles, and that's why I still have faith in the boy.
Oh, go on, Baxty.
I don't disagree with a lot of what you've said there, Shez, but there's one race that is screaming in my head right now from last season, which was before the TD came in, and that was Imola. That was
so bad.
That was a mistake. He had P2 in the bag and he threw it away with a mistake. And I think, I think part of the problem he had, and the reason why I say I think he maybe needed another year before he went to Ferrari, was because I think in 2019 he kind of got thrust into a sort of title fight because Ferrari screwed around with the driver hierarchy when they should have just said you're equal until we say so, which is what Mercedes do. And I think he would have been a lot more competitive in 2019 had they done that. But I think a lot of expectation was placed upon him. Let's compare him with Max. Max came in very highly rated, young teenager. Should he be in F1? He proved very quickly should have been. And then he got the Red Bull drive, won his first race, and everything got to fever pitch. But then he spent a couple of years kind of, making loads of mistakes, crashes. I mean, you think of the crashes he had with Daniel Ricciardo, the stupidest overtake I've ever seen in China 2018. He made these mistakes, but because the Red Bull was sort of third or fourth, and everyone's focusing on Lewis versus Seb, those mistakes don't play out in the same sort of way. Where Charles is in a Ferrari, that comes with its own unique pressure. If he was in a Mercedes, if he was in a Red Bull, if he was in a McLaren, he wouldn't have that same pressure. But because he's in a Ferrari, he's essentially got the eyes of Italy watching him, and they are crying out for the next Schumacher. They thought they had it with Seb. They thought they had it with Alonso. They thought they had it with Kimi.
They did have it with Alonso. They wasted him.
Well, that is partly true, but but they want this next dominant driver who's going to bring them championship glory. And unfortunately, I think they kind of put too much on Charles too soon. And I think what he needs to do is he needs to reset and just go, look, 2023 is off. I'm just going to spend this time learning, and I'm going to put pressure on the team to build me a car. I mean, I think after Baku, personally, I think Charles Leclerc needs to be the number one driver. And I think Ferrari need to support him as the number one driver. I think that's the one thing he's really missing, is that definitive, you're our guy. Because I think there is still a faction of the team that say Charles might be quicker, but Carlos is going to be more consistent. And I think if Fred Vasseur just sits them down and goes, right, Charles the number one, Carlos, you're the number two, unless something changes. And I think that he needs that. I think he needs, like Max has got as at Red Bull, I think Charles needs it as well.
But I don't think that's so much of a problem this season. I think this season he's got the team a bit more behind him through the performances that he's had up until now. He's clearly been the quicker, better performing driver up until this point, right? But, Miami, the race he maybe underperformed a little bit, but this is the season where actually I'm happy for him to dump it in the wall. He's not going to win the title this season, but but I want to see those peaks. That's what makes Charles Leclerc. And going back to your Imola point, yeah, I agree. That was a bit hot-headed, but that was him going, I don't want to settle for second, and that is something that if he hadn't dumped it in the wall, you would have said that's a Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen kind of mentality. That's what they did. That's what they do. They don't settle for second place. They go for things that are not impossible. To Cameron's point about. To Cameron's point about, I don't understand how Max Verstappen did that. Well, if he dumped it in the wall, you would have said, well, he was trying too hard. That's what Charles doing in a car that isn't necessarily allowing him to do that.
But
And yes, I agree. There needs to be a little bit of an improvement on the car side, but that's for Ferrari to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't think it's for Charles to step back and go, I'm going to take my foot off the gas. Because as soon as he does that, you lose Charles Leclerc because he is an on-the-edge driver.
This is the crux of it that you've just spoken to, Shez, that I'm not sure whether he has to. You're right, you will lose some of Charles Leclerc if you ask him to dial that back. He's a by-the-wire type driver, but I just... Yeah. But, brother, I'm concerned because at this stage of his career, I just want to see that mature. To get Charles Leclerc over the line in this, what it looks like is going to become the Max Verstappen Red Bull era, he can't afford to be giving away 25 points from mistakes like he had at Paul Ricard. You can't do that, and you definitely can't. Even if you do have those mistakes, as all the great ones did, right? You can go back and Schumacher had them. Even Adelaide '94, some people say it was a mistake because he hit the ball. All of the greats will have bad mistakes in critical times. They will and make bad calls, but it's the frequency of the mistakes with Leclerc. He's having them too frequently, and I feel like at the moment, this season at least, he's having them more often than he did last year. So his growth is reverse. This isn't upside, this is downside. This is crazy.
We're talking about this in a race in which Max Verstappen also didn't put a time in because he made a massive error into the turn one sweepers.
That's a great point.
So how can we say that it's okay for Max to make mistakes and he's still great, but Charles puts it in the wall and he's not? So one thing I will agree with is that if he really wants to stamp his authority, he needs to find a way to make a mistake and not stick it in the wall. I'll give you that.
I'm not even saying stamp authority, Shez. I'm saying beat Max Verstappen. Yeah. If he has a chance, and you're right, Max also makes mistakes, although last year he didn't make too bloody many. Count them on like 2 or 3 fingers, material ones of consequence. So so what we're talking about, Shez, from Charles' perspective, it's the type of mistakes that he's making and the frequency, right? Because every time Charles makes a mistake, it's of consequence. It's not a cheeky spin that Max has and then he writes it and goes on to win the bloody race. He's not having those type of ones. He's going to bin it in the back. Even the flip it. The most recent mistakes, he's in the wall, chaps. He's lucky to be able to drive those ones back without a damaged car. If he goes in the other side, we've got an issue with the gearbox. So it's the type of mistake that Charles is making and the frequency that, for me, as a Charles Leclerc fan, concerns me, Shez.
But that's where I think it's not just him. You're talking about Max Verstappen in a team that is, 1, built around him, and 2, has the preeminent aerodynamic genius designing their cars. Ferrari don't have that. They've got a dodgy at best team structure with a brand spanking new team principle with a car that has limited development potential, and he is then trying to be the team leader that is trying to gap the difference between a car that can't do it and a team that has everything.
I don't know, Shez. I don't think he is. I don't think he is trying to be the team leader though.
I think that's exactly what he is doing. I think he's the one that thinks like I'm going to have to be the one that bridges the gap because my team aren't doing it at the moment. And when they do, and I mean that from an organizational and a technical point of view. If the car is closer and they're not making mistakes in pit stops and strategy, Charles isn't having to push the way he is pushing to try and show that the car's got pace. That look, I'm still competitive. I've still got something to give here. As soon as you do that, he becomes more competitive.
I think you're making excuses here, Shez. Baxty, chime in quickly, bro. Before
I mean, first of all, Cam, you made a brilliant point that Max's mistakes, he doesn't make many of them, and when he does make them, they don't affect him in the same way that they affect Charles. And that's important. I mean, the mistakes that Max made last year, he had a couple of spins when he switched off, but he still went and won the race. It didn't affect him that way. Whereas Charles has made a mistake, it's cost him a chance of maybe qualifying front row, second row, and having a chance of getting a podium. Whereas, Max made a mistake, but he drove very well. And Shez, I agree with you. We should be criticising Max for that mistake. Absolutely. A 2-time world champion in a dominant car shouldn't really be making mistakes like that. But I think this is kind of making my point that this is why I think actually Ferrari need to put their money behind a horse, even if they do it with Carlos Sainz. I don't think they should, but they need to go right. We need a driver. Yeah, because Mercedes is very weird in that they can operate with two high level drivers. They know how to manage that. Yeah, there was a bit of teething problems with Lewis and Nico, but like they can just about manage having two alpha drivers. Ferrari can't do that, and we know they can't. They work their best when they have a dominant driver and a number two who they need to do the job. They had it with Schumacher and Barrichello, and then a couple of seasons or one season with Schumacher and Massa as well. It's a slightly different situation, but relatively Michael was still the boss. And I think that's what Ferrari need to do. And I think Fred Vasseur needs to go, right, we're either backing Charles or we're backing Carlos. They're going to be our number one driver. I think it should be Charles. I think Charles, will react to that. I just want to clarify one thing. I wasn't saying that Charles needed to take his foot off the gas. What I'm thinking is that he's just got to go in and use this as a learning experience and get himself ready for a title fight in the same way that's what Max was doing.
Yeah, which is why I don't have a problem with him dumping it in the wall in Miami qualifying. He's not going to win the race. He's not going to win the title. So if he's going to make a mistake, make it now. I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, Shez, I'm not feeling that, Shez. I can't.
I think this goes back to the whole Ferrari unique pressure type thing. You don't want to be seeing a red car going off into the wall.
So let me just talk to that very quickly, right? Because I think the backing a horse is, I think that's a side issue for them. They have fundamental problems. So your argument is that Ferrari work best when they have a dominant driver and a second driver. I think my argument here is that Ferrari don't know what is best for them because they don't have a team structure that is organized enough to allow either of their drivers to perform at their best.
Yeah, I agree. And this is what Fred Vasseur needs to do.
Yes, but that's before saying, we're backing Charles. Charles, I think, on a longer term contract, knows sort of where he stands within that team, whatever Carlos is doing. But the team haven't organized themselves well enough to be able to mobilize that.
I think
they're not using the pace that Charles has got because they keep messing up strategy. They keep messing up pit stops, organizational stuff, and then now they don't even have the car necessarily to bring anything else to bear. So until they get all of their house in order, backing a horse is a secondary issue for me.
I think actually, I get what you're saying. I do disagree though, because I think if Fred Vasseur, let's just say you're Fred Vasseur, when I say I'm Fred Vasseur, I'm calling a meeting, I'm saying, right, Charles, you're going to be our number one driver. I think that's going to empower him to push standards and push that team forward in the same way that Michael Schumacher did. And it will give him that, because I don't think Charles knows where he stands. I think he thought he was going to be the number one driver, but he kind of had to be a little bit deferential to Seb, I feel. But even though he was quicker than Seb, and I think now he's got Carlos, and he thought he was going to be the number one driver, but he was never really given that status. I think if you back him, he will push that team as well, and he will start asking the right questions, going, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? What can we do better? Along with Fred Vasseur. And the two of them together, like Jean Todt and Michael Schumacher did, can rebuild that team, get it going in the right direction, get in the right people, because clearly the people that are there aren't doing a good enough job. You need to, look at, they bought Ross Brawn and Rory Byrne over to help sort them out. Find people like that. Who's there in the F1 paddock not named Adrian Newey and Dan Fallows? Who's there? Who can do that job for you?
But that's actually a major problem, and it's something that maybe we should talk about at some point, that there is a bit of a dearth of top line technical directors, that are around that can do that job. But I think, I take your point about the Michael Schumacher era, but actually the Fernando era showed that, even when you didn't necessarily have the car, Ferrari were able to organize themselves in a way that allowed them to pull off a championship bid. If they can get back to that level of organization, whether that is by backing one driver over the other, or if it's just about a root and branch understanding of why they are not able to use the data they have and deploy it in a way that gets them results, it doesn't matter which one of those things they do. They just need to do one of those things to make sure that they are consistently in a position to win races. Because Charles can dump it in the wall as much as he wants, as much as he does at the moment. But that is not having a material impact on whether he wins this title or not. That's not the fundamental reason. And when you expand that to last season, Charles' crashes were also not the reason that Ferrari lost that title.
True. No, that's very true. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that for 1 second.
That's absolutely true. The majority of the points dropped were Ferraris and strategy and reliability. I want to say it's 140 to 40 or something in and of that. And this is not just points that Ferrari lost, but that Max Verstappen gained. So we're talking about the point differential between Max and Charles and where they ended up. But Shez, I don't know, man. I feel like you're being a bit... Take some responsibility, Charles Leclerc. If you are that guy, then be that guy. And that guy, here's my hot take and me laying down the challenge to Charles Leclerc. If you are that guy, be that guy. And what that guy doesn't do is bin it as often as Charles Leclerc is currently binning. That's the problem. You are right, Shez, in that there are deeper seated, more foundational problems at Ferrari, but Charles can't control those
Exactly.
So the only thing Charles can do, Shez, is do his job to the best of his ability, compartmentalize quali, and trying to optimize for 25 points on a Sunday. That's all that you can do, mate. And Shez, just have a bit of race savvy, manage the race in real time. When there's a safety car, contribute to that conversation in real time, like a George Russell would, and like your teammate on the other side of the garage, Carlos Sainz would. That's all that you can do. The rest of it, I get the CPU and bandwidth issue. Of course, those issues and the debate, all of the media furore about his future and whether he's going to be at Brackley in a few years. Of course, these things are going to affect Charles, but what the true greats do, like a Niki Lauda did very famously, just get back in the car, try and compartmentalize these things and do the best you can at not allowing these outside influences and circumstances and downsides and poor infrastructure and poor strategy decisions and craziness and rancor in the team, not allowing these to drip feed through to your performance in the car. That's all that he can do. And right now, he's not that guy, Shez, because he's not doing that. That's the point, sadly.
This is my last
I know, before we...
this. Because I think this is Charles showing, leading by example. This is him going, this is me working at the best of my ability and putting the car in places it shouldn't be. And I'm working that hard at putting it in the wall. You need to up your game. You need to get the car better. And you need to sort out your organisation. When you do that, and you've got my driving skills, we're going to start winning races and titles.
Baxty, I'm not having that. Not as Baxty. I'll come to you very quickly if I can just get this one in. The mistake that he made by going over that drain. If you are a Alain Prost, as an example, God tier racecraft that he was famous for, I think you should not. This isn't your first time round that track, yeah. This is twice that we've been round there now. I feel like, okay, so they'd resurfaced it or whatever. I feel like you should not. These are things not necessarily that you should know, but you should be aware of them in your driving of the track. As somebody who's famed for his feel and his dexterity of touch on the steering wheel, I feel like you have to. You don't think you should feel mistakes is mistakes, and if you're even champions make them.
Alain
sometimes.
Prost, Imola, 1988. Exactly what you're saying. He let the situation get to him, and he spun it behind Senna. That's why he lost that race. He got so angry about the restart that he spun it. So even Alain Prost will do that.
But I'm not saying. Listen, I'm not saying that great drivers do not make mistakes, Shez. You misconstrue. What I'm saying that if Charles Leclerc is one day to be on the Mount Rushmore of F1 drivers, as I think he has the capability, he has that ability to be, right. If he is going to be there, It's the type of mistakes and the frequency of. Alain Prost, of course, made mistakes. Senna, Jacques, all of the great, Gilles, all of the great ones.
But that's a great example of this,
mate. Yeah, no, he's a great example. Very similar to Charles, in fact.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying to you is the frequency and the consequence. These are big bloody mistakes, mate. Win it or bin it every single time. Go on, Baxty, you have a hot mic, sir.
Yeah, I feel like my last point on this is kind of bring it all into a bit of context, really, because we're being critical of Charles, but I think we understand that a lot of his problems are not of his own doing. That Maranello is a dumpster fire right now, and they need to sort their SH1T out. I think the reason why I'm being so hard on Charles is because when you take that all away, I mean, I think your maths was that he would have been about 10 points behind Max last year or something. That 10 points could be that crash in Imola. It could be Paul Ricard.
That's the point.
And when you're going up against a driver as good as Max, and then you throw in Lewis Hamilton, you throw in George Russell, you can't make those mistakes. And it's because I like Charles that I'm making this criticism of him. And like Seb Vettel, how many mistakes did he make in 2017 and 2018? The only one I think that 2017 start in Singapore, 2018 Germany. I'm criticizing him because I can see the ability, and a world champion does not make many of those mistakes. You make the odd one, that's fine. You're not going to be faultless over a season. That's very rare, but it's just the regularity and impact of those mistakes, and that's why I'm being critical of him. I want to see him do better because I think he is a guy that could lead Ferrari to titles, and we need Ferrari at the front of the grid because that's the way F1 is, and he's the guy to do it. And I care, but there's too many at the moment, and he needs to cut it out.
The prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour. Let's move
on to the jury. For
moving
sure.
on. No, Shez, go on.
I really want to read the comments. Please do comment.
I know, mate. It's going to get techie. Shez, answer back to that one, and then we'll move on quickly.
Yeah, okay. Very, very quickly. It's because that whole the Imola spin cost him the 10 points he needed to have won the championship, but for all the Ferrari errors. Those two things are there together.
It's hypothetical. Yeah.
They don't come together. They don't come separately. Lewis and Max don't have to worry about their teams. In 2021, generally, Lewis didn't have to worry about his team making dumb errors. He had full faith in his team, whether that was misplaced or not, Cameron. Lewis had full faith in his team. Didn't have to worry about that. Max, same. Doesn't have to worry about his team. The only person he has to worry about is the guy in the other car. Charles never had that. Throughout last season, other than the first 2 or 3 races, he's always looking over his shoulder going, am I going to, are they going to screw me over with a bad pit stop call? True. None of the other drivers have got that. And to
but how
minimize that and say, my argument to this is that Charles is the fall guy for a bigger problem at Ferrari. He's the guy who's front and center and makes the error that you see on a Saturday. But there's a sequence of things that happens that makes that happen, and he's just the end product. He is driving his heart out, and he's driving really, really well. He's put it in the wall once this season, twice in one weekend. Fair enough.
Cool. Thank you.
But one was in practice. Come on.
Minor.
Well, he would have been in the wall if there wasn't a gravel trap in Australia. Sorry.
But see, that's him getting himself out of trouble.
Oh my God, Shez, I can't do it. The Charles Leclerc bias is strong in this one.
Charles was. Anyway,
I was being facetious.
There is an end product that we are seeing that is not just on. We can't take that at face value. That the reason that Charles is spinning is all Charles. It's not.
No, we know the car is temperamental, brother. Absolutely a diva, a tire
not
eater.
Not just the car. I mean, the organisation behind it.
Oh yeah, that's got to affect him.
When you can't have faith in the team behind you, and you've got a car that's tricky, and you've got a rival that's that far ahead, there's a lot of stuff stacking up. And he is a driver that puts it on the edge, and I want him to. I want him to do that every race.
All I will say to you, Shez, in closing, is that irrespective, I don't disagree with the causation lines that you're dotting here. I don't disagree with them. Absolutely, bandwidth and CPU in real time for all of these 20 drivers on the grid is fundamental. Yeah, if you've got all these problems and all these things going on in the background, it's going to affect you. I think it's affecting Lewis Hamilton today. I am convinced of it. It will affect you. Nevertheless, though, chaps, can't put it in the barrier. You can't put it in the barrier. The true great ones have that ability to rise above it. Like, I mean, Lewis in 21 is a brilliant example, right? Those last 4 races, the bloody pressure and the chaos, and not like, mate, that is like everything that was going on there is chaos, but that Lewis showed the ability to rise above that, compartmentalize, dial in and find your flow state. That's exactly what Charles wants to tap into, and I'm not seeing him tap into it often enough. Occasionally you will get these bright sparks and these genius moments from Charles Leclerc. You guys have cited last season putting Max under manners. The DRS chicken was incredible. The race restart also incredible with Abu Dhabi 21 fresh in the mind. I'm loving Charles for that sort of stuff each and every single time, but just keep it on the black stuff for a little bit, Charles. As you segue onto our final topic, Miami, give me a couple of words. The phrase that comes to mind, the F1 circus. Did we have too much circus and not enough F1 at Miami? Baxty, how did you receive, as a microcosm, how did you receive the driver introductions with Ladies Love Cool J?
I haven't seen the whole thing, but as a musician, watching will.i.am conduct an orchestra, like I'm gonna bring politics into this very quickly. I've been conducted by Michael Gove, and Michael Gove is a better conductor than will.i.am. Look, this is not conducting.
Musical gatekeeping a bit there, Baxty.
I don't care. Like, look, I mean, Miami, I think, look, F1 in America has a lot of problems right now because I think they are prioritizing entertainment. Vegas is going to be a spectacle, but I think it is going to be a horrendous show because you've got influencers going who aren't there for the racing. They've got a VIP area, which I think doesn't even show the track. I saw the food menu, which, okay, it's served 4 people, but you're still charging $500 for lobster rolls.
Oh.
Are you having a laugh?
Right,
they might be able to pay for that, but that's ridiculous. Somebody paid $45 for a Wagyu beef sandwich, and when they showed the Wagyu beef sandwich, it was, little ham in a like wafer thin ham in a roll. and this is where F1 in America is going, that they are just ripping people off with hotel prices, flights, and everything else, and they only care about the show and getting the right people to watch the show. We want to watch racing. And I know I'm being a gatekeeper here. I know I am. But, yes, the entertainment needs to be there to get newcomers in, but there's got to be a racing product at its core. And when we go to America, apart from COTA, I will say COTA's an exception to this. But
I'm glad you said
when we gone to Miami, both times it has been about the show. Remember last year with that, where you got Christian Horner walking behind a police bike, just going like...
Did not like
just
at all.
It's got potential, Miami, as a track, but right now it hasn't delivered.
Oh, Shez, talk to me. What did he? Too much Miami Vice?
Yeah, maybe. I guess I'm less offended because my usual weekend watching is to switch on just after the anthem and then watch the cars lining up. I did catch a bit of LL Cool J. I've got to say I was tickled a little bit to see him. I thought that was over-egging the cake a little bit. I was actually, me and the missus were both more offended by the Fast and Furious Sky intro than the actual F1 intro. It was just so cringy. And these guys are actually like A-listers. I don't know what they thought they were doing, but it was, that was a bit silly. But I have to say, in terms of the actual show, look, if it's starting to impact the drivers' preparation, and the drivers are complaining that it's it's impacting how well they're prepared to go racing, which is, as you say, Baxty, what we are actually there for. Then you're gonna have to rethink it. And to F1's credit, they have taken that on board, and they have said they're going to review